Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today we have another special guest, Luciano. How you doing, man?
Hey, hello, Zach. Thanks for having me. I'm great.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Oh, yes, it's really good. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So, Luciano, before we start, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your creation journey, and what kind of content you create?
Absolutely. So I am a software engineer. I've been in the industry for about 15 years. And probably the most famous or most successful achievement that I have is being the co-author of a famous programming book called Node.js Design Patterns. I have it here for the video.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And this book has been, I guess, relatively successful for being a programming book and has been around for a while. There are already 3 editions in the market. In terms of day-to-day job, I work as a senior architect for a company called Fortiorem, which is based in Ireland, but we are a remote-first company. It's kind of a relatively small and new service company which is specialized on AWS, cloud computing, and serverless. So this is kind of what I do day-to-day with the company, working for a bunch of different customers. So in terms of content creation, of course, as a software engineer, I tend to create content for software engineers. I think I started around 10 years ago doing that when I opened my personal blog, where I was basically posting about experiments and things that I learned while developing my career as a software engineer. 2 years ago, I was awarded by Microsoft the title of Most Valuable Professional, which is a title that basically Microsoft gives to people that like to evangelize software engineering and share their expertise. So it's definitely a good achievement to get because it kind of proves that my efforts are being valuable to the software engineering community.
That's awesome, man. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, in terms of content creation, I also do a bunch of other small things. And it might feel like a lot, but I try to be very efficient with the time I dedicate to all this activity. One is a newsletter called Full Stack Bulletin, which is like a weekly newsletter. And it's kind of a curation thing. I try to push 7 articles every week based on the ones that I found most interesting the previous week. So it's not necessarily articles that I write, but it's more things that I found interesting in the industry. I also have a weekly podcast with Owen Shanagy, who is the CTO and co-founder of Fortiorem, the company I work for, where we talk about news in the world of AWS, our take on certain different things that are happening in the cloud. I still publish blog posts every once in a while. I'm also very active on Twitter, LinkedIn, publishing tips and chatting with people about random tech subjects. And finally, quite recently, this is something I started about 1 year ago with 2 friends. We started to live stream on Twitch, our attempt at solving coding challenges in Rust, which is a new language that we are trying to learn. So it's just kind of a nice way to combine content creation with learning while having fun with friends. So it's still an experiment. I'm having a lot of fun. I don't know if people are actually getting value out of this, but for me, it's been extremely interesting and fun to do.
That's awesome, man. Twitch is really interesting when it comes to streaming. So I was curious, why didn't you go with YouTube Live, for instance, instead of Twitch?
That's a good question. I don't know if I put a lot of thought into that. We publish all the recordings on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where people can check out all the previous episodes of the show. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've seen many other programmers using Twitch, and probably that was the main driver. I like that Twitch has a lot of interactivity and gamification. Like you can do polls, you can have people triggering actions on your stream, which I don't know how feasible all of that is with YouTube. With Twitch, it seems like it's built into the experience.
Yeah. Twitch is way more, way more advanced when it comes to live streaming, and YouTube is just trying to catch up in that sense. So, Luciano, I want to ask you about which platform are you mainly focused on? So you said you work on LinkedIn, Twitter, you have some blogging, features that you talked about. So which platform would you say is your main platform, if that's the case?
Yeah, in terms of social media, probably Twitter is the one I use the most and the one I put the most effort throughout the last few years. So probably that's one of the main platform I would suggest to use if you want to engage with me and make sure that you get a quick answer. In terms of content creation, I think I used a bunch of different platforms, and I try to be lightweight. And as a software engineer, I try to automate things whenever I can. I can give you an example. For instance, for the newsletter, I use MailChimp. For Full Stack Bulletin, I use MailChimp as a newsletter provider. But because it's kind of a content curation activity, what I ended up doing is trying to automate as much as I can the entire workflow. So it's a weekly thing, and it's based on the articles that I've read the previous week. So what I basically end up doing is every time I see an article that's interesting and I've read it and it looks like something that can be interesting for other people in the industry, I put it on Twitter on an account that is dedicated to Full Stack Bulletin, and it's scheduled so that account is kind of already promoting interesting things continuously. Then every week I have a script that runs in the cloud that takes all the tweets from the previous week, does some sort of ranking, like it tries to figure out which one are the 7 articles that made the most sense or people kind of reshared more. And then it compiles a preview of the newsletter based on that. I have a template and all. Then at that point, I just get the preview on MailChimp, and I'm just going to go in and edit it and make it nice, fix all the picture description and so on. And basically, I'm able to do all that workflow in, I don't know, depending on how it came out well on its own, probably from between 5 minutes and half an hour of manual work to make it look nicer.
Okay. So having said that, now I know that you are actually a developer, automating all of this, right?
Yeah, there is actually a funny joke in the software engineering community. It's like, why should you do a 1 hour job when you can spend a week automating it?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some friends who are developers. Like I come from a background of graphic design, but I had friends who were developers, and I can totally see that. Like, there's this challenge thing, right? Like you want to do it your own way. Luciano, I want to ask you about Instagram. So you said you were posting some things on LinkedIn and Twitter. Have you done anything on like Instagram Reels? So the reason I'm asking is because I see a lot of like software developers doing those kind of reels of like, the process of doing code. Some of them are kind of funny. Some of them are just like musical kind of like videos. And I was wondering, like, have you ever, tried that, or it's not really your thing?
I haven't tried it already, but I agree with you. I've seen some of them that are extremely funny, but at the same time, they are very educational. So I think it requires a certain skill to have that balance between making something funny that still has a very strong educational value. So fair play to the people that are able to achieve that, but it's not something I have tried yet.
Okay. So let's move on talking about your process in terms of creating content. Can you walk us through what kind of software or tool you mostly rely on? It could be like a video editing software, a blogging feature that you rely on, maybe even your hardware, what kind of hardware you use. Just walk us through the technical part of your creating content process.
Yeah, so we already mentioned the automation for the newsletter. In general, I try to be as lightweight as possible. For instance, for my blog and most of the kind of written content, I tend to use Markdown as much as possible.
Can you tell us about Markdown? I kind of heard the name, but maybe somebody doesn't know what it is. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a very simple, I would say, maybe for a software engineer it feels simple, but I don't know if everyone else would agree. But it's effectively like a text format. Like it's not a technology, like it's not a software per se. It's more a format that you can use to write text into. And the idea is that you are not going to be spending too much time selecting text and applying style, because you basically can write, for instance, an hashtag before a line, and that means this is a title. Then if you leave, for instance, 2 empty lines between a section and another, you are basically creating paragraphs. And basically, it's just a very quick way to just keep writing and don't think too much about styling. So it's, at least for me, it's easier to focus on what I'm trying to write rather than thinking too much about, okay, what's going to be the final style. And then basically there are different tools that can take that file as an input and actually produce HTML pages. So this
Okay.
is
Sorry, one question that comes to mind while you explaining this: would you recommend this to someone who's not a developer, or only for developers?
I think if you find yourself writing a lot of text, the learning curve is actually fairly small. So I think you might end up having a very big advantage in terms of really just thinking about things that matter to you, which is probably the content and the flow of what you're writing, rather than thinking about, I want to make this particular word bold or italic, and then you stop yourself, you select the word and click somewhere else, and then you lost your train of thought.
You're literally describing my workflow.
Exactly. With Markdown, basically, you just need to learn, for instance, that if you put an asterisk before and after that particular word, it's going to become italic when you render the final output. So there are different softwares that make that process easy. Like as you apply the rules of Markdown, they already show you a preview. So you get the best of both worlds. But Markdown per se is just a file format. Then you have so many different tools that can use that to produce documents.
So, someone might ask, like, okay, so what's the difference between doing it this way with Markdown, or just like the regular way, which is like you write text without any formatting, and then at the end you spend like 5 minutes doing the titling and like different formatting. So, what's the benefit in terms of time spending and all this stuff in your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in my personal workflow, what I do when I try to write an article is generally come up with like already a structure. For instance, I will think about what are the main sections of this article and just try to write down some titles. So already just being able in that phase to say hashtag title, hashtag another title, hashtag another title, and have a preview that already shows that like the big text in bold, I think it kind of helps me to visualize how it's going to be the final output without having to apply any formatting manually myself. And then I keep iterating that way. Then I start to write a little bit of a paragraph, another little bit of a paragraph. Generally, it can even be like a bullet list where I'm just going to put down what are the main points that I want to discuss in this paragraph. And with Markdown, you just do a dash and then space and one item. And then if you do that for every line, it's already rendering a bullet list. So it's extremely quick for you to put something down, but at the same time, you see some formatting, and that formatting gives you a good idea for what's going to be like the final look of your article. So I think it's, at least for me, works well because it's kind of a trade-off between not spending too much time formatting, but still getting enough formatting to have a feeling for what's going to be the final outcome of the article.
Okay, I now I get how it works. If I'm honest, as a designer, I think this will not be something that designers will use because we're kind of visual learners mostly. So we like to see what we're doing, at least speaking about my experience and other people I know. But I think this is going to be very helpful for people like maybe you or other, not really for developers, but people generally who want to, like you said, create content and don't want to be bogged down by the styling and the design part of it. So I think it's really useful. Can you spell it for us? Markdown is just like English, right? Markdown.
Mark, M-A-R-K down, D-O.
Down. Okay, so
W-N. By the way, if you use, I'm not sure what's the official website, but yeah, it's just a format that you can find in many tools. I think even Notion supports a good degree.
Oh, really?
Of
so I love Notion. That's how I write my script for YouTube.
Yeah, so in that sense, Notion, of course, is innovative in many ways, but they are just reusing this Markdown technology. So, for instance, in Notion, if you just do a dash and a space, it immediately becomes a bullet point item, right?
Okay.
And this is just, let's say, stalling or taken from Markdown. But yeah, they are using the technology, which is something you can leverage in many other tools and workflows.
Okay. That's awesome. I really love Notion because of the features that they have. It's really a powerful tool. I feel that I'm only using like 5% of the features. It's so overwhelming.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
So that's Markdown. Anything else that you use in terms of creating content? So basically, just to structure our talk, Markdown basically using it for creating text content or written content for blogging, right? Can we move on to other type of content and what kind of tools you use?
Yeah, there is another tool that I like a lot for social media management. It's called Feed Hive. This tool is basically a mix between a tool that allows you to schedule posts. So for instance, if you have interesting ideas and you don't like you just want to promote it in a moment where you think it makes sense, or you want to try to distribute all your content over time rather than just publishing all in one go, FeedDive allows you to literally see a calendar, and you might create in advance all the interesting slots for you in the calendar, and then it helps you to make sure every week you are filling out all your slots for content promotion, or just making sure that you are visible and available on social media. And the other cool feature of FeedDive is that it has also a few interesting analytics things. For instance, you can see the posts that were received the best by your audience. And therefore, you can understand, okay, this particular topic is maybe something I should expand on and create more content. Or if you're running out of ideas, there is also a section for idea generation where you can see people kind of in a similar space to you, what kind of content they are creating, what kind of content is resonating best with their audience. And if you are still not finding anything, there are kind of generic suggestion. I don't know, talk about a recent success that you had, or talk about, I don't know, a failure and what did you learn. So it's really interesting because it kind of pushes you to always be active in the social space.
Would you say this is similar to the other, social media management tools like Hootsuite and Buffer, or is it a bit different in different?
I think it's very similar. Yeah, it's very similar in terms of the main feature. What I like is that they are putting a lot of effort in not just scheduling, but also making sure that you find the right spot of what kind of content really your audience enjoys and push you to do more of that. And also there are other kind of new cool features. For instance, there is this social inbox feature that I haven't seen in other software like that, where basically one page you can see all the comments that you received on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can literally just reply one by one, and it will kind of move on to the next one automatically. So it's just a nice way to make sure you are not missing out any reply to people, which I find myself it can happen very easily if you just use Twitter UI on the web or LinkedIn UI on the web, because you have to move from one page to another for every single
That's actually very, very useful. Like I'm thinking about it now. Like I have a lot of social accounts, and like jumping from one to the other. Sometimes you miss replies, and people are like, "Hey, why are you not replying to my comment?" And like, I wish I saw it. Like it just disappeared, or like it went to a black hole of the internet. So yeah, that's going to be a useful feature.
Yeah, the other cool thing is that it keeps showing you all the comments that you haven't replied to. So it's not like you just see it once and then you don't see it again. You literally have to explicitly say, I don't want to reply to this one, if you want to leave it alone and not reply. So it's actually, I think it's really meant for that use case of people missing out on comments and making sure that you really address everyone.
That's really an awesome feature. What's the name again?
FeedHive, Hive.
Okay, FeedHive. Awesome. Any other tool you want to share with us in terms of creating content?
Yeah, another one that, because I do also quite a bit of like public speaking and technical presentations. So there is a tool that I really like for creating slides online that is called literally slides.com.
Okay.
And it's very good because it's very simple to use. Like it looks like
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Are you familiar with pitch.com? Which is
Actually, no,
tool?
I haven't used that one. But maybe very similar. It's like a tool to build slides deck. And then there are a couple of features that I really like. For instance, you immediately get a live URL for your slides. So you don't need to say, oh, I'm going to publish these slides later and give you the URL. No, when you have your slides, you already have a public URL. So you can easily even put that same public URL in your own slides. So while you are presenting, you can just say, these are the slides, put a QR code there, and people can immediately scan the QR code and get a copy of the slides even before you start talking.
Wow.
And then you can also have this feature to present online interactively. So you could even give people a link that already moves the slides while you are talking. So there is also this feature, which I don't use it that much, but I suppose it can be convenient when go
ahead, sorry.
Yeah, maybe when you don't have like a big screen or something and you want to make sure people somehow have the slides moving in their own, laptop or mobile, whatever.
I was going to say that's what Canva is moving towards, like Canva now,
Interesting.
they're doing the live presentation thing, and I've seen them really like investing in this a lot now. A lot of features that maybe are copied from other platforms, and
That's interesting.
it's a wild war out there for the online
Absolutely.
presentation, realm. In terms of video, Luciano, do you do video editing, or is that something you outsource? Or
So we do very lightweight video editing for the AWS Bytes podcast and for the Twitch live stream. After we've completed the stream, we download it and we publish on YouTube. And for that, I end up using DaVinci Resolve. But literally, I'm not a sophisticated user. I only know how to create a track, put a video there, maybe slice it a little bit, increase a little bit the speed or remove some silence here and there. But that's all I do. Like I'm not a very proficient user of this kind of tools.
okay. Now that we talked about the technical aspect of your content creation, can you walk us through a content creation day, if you have that? So the reason I'm asking this is interviewing, multitude of creators from different parts of the world. I've seen this kind of pattern. Some creators, they have dedicated days for creating content, like Monday, Tuesday, Friday, whatever. And some creators, they have like flexible scheduling. Which category are you in? And can you tell us a bit more about your scheduling and creation day?
Yeah, I think I am a bit of a mix between the two, because for certain things, because they are recurring activities, I need to have kind of like a schedule to some extent. Otherwise, other ones like, I don't know, creating articles, they are mostly driven by, I don't know, did I learn something interesting that I want to share recently? Or did I work on an interesting project that I want to present in a conference or something like that?
But do you have like for the articles, do you have like a structure around, like, let's say I need at least one article a week, but it doesn't matter which day I'm going to create? Or is it like it doesn't matter the frequency? So what I'm asking is about the frequency. Is there like a structure for the frequency, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so there is no frequency for articles and for talking at conferences or meetups. It's more literally on demand when I feel like, okay, I have something to share. For the podcast and the newsletter, definitely there is a schedule. It's weekly, and I try to figure out how to stick to that weekly schedule. So a few things that help me there are, I'm very lucky with my work because I get Fridays to focus on this kind of activities. And it's, even if it's paid work time, that the company recognizes that it's extremely valuable for even making the company itself visible. So it's something that I get time to work. So every Friday I can spend most of my time focusing on, okay, is there any piece of content that I can produce that makes sense, or should I just focus on the next episode of the podcast? So that's something that helps a lot. But other than that, I will find some time during the week that is a little bit random, depending when I have time, when I have inspiration to focus on other things. Like, I don't know, if I'm writing an article or maybe coming up with a code example, I will try to figure out some time in between work where I can focus on that and start to do some progress. It tends to be like, I think all the weekly activities are very fast in terms of my time is very well organized and I'm going to be very efficient. While all the other activities, they tend to be very slow and spread out over time. So I might be working on an article, for instance, for 3 weeks, just when I have a little bit of time, do a little bit of progress, and then eventually I will publish the article. While for the podcast, we have figured out a schedule where, because this is an activity that we do in 2 people, so we need to come up with kind of a soft script for what we want to say. And generally one of the 2 people starts and then the other person joins and tries to add something. Then we just meet on Riverside. We do the recording almost live. Like most of the time we don't really need to do many edits because it's kind of a conversation like the one we are having right now. But it's literally, we might be spending 1 hour to come up with a script, 1 hour to go in, do the recording, then maybe another half an hour to just cut the recording down and create the video, upload and add all the description and so on. So I think we are able at this point to produce a new episode with, I don't know, 3 to 5 hours of work, which I think is very efficient for 2 people.
What was that a decision that came on purpose? Like, we want to make it streamlined, or was it like more, okay, this is the way we're going to try it now. And it turned out to be a seamless process. So the reason I'm asking about this, because I had like so I have a tech channel, and I had a podcast for tech with the other co-hosts in a different city with different time zones. And, it was really difficult to get things working seamlessly. And when I did this podcast, which is the Content Creator Life, I had to learn from that experience and make it a little bit more seamless and straightforward. Is there something that you learned before starting the podcast that helped you make it streamlined, or is it just like trying different things and it turned out this way?
I think we are trying different things still. Like actually, when we started the podcast, we initially called, like the subtitle of the podcast was like 5 minutes of AWS news every week. And then we realized that it was actually really cool at the beginning because we didn't have to spend a lot of time, and it was very easy to think about content ideas because anything could be easily fit in 5 minutes and you're done with one particular issue. But then we realized that when we wanted to discuss topics that were a little bit more advanced, 5 minutes were never enough, and we ended up doing like 15 minutes, and then eventually 20 minutes, and then eventually 25 minutes, and it didn't make sense anymore to have that subtitle. People were like, yeah, you say 5 minutes, but you never really do 5 minutes. So that was one of the experiments we did, and eventually we moved away from that model. But I think because we do this as a kind of side project in the company, we need to be very efficient. Like this is not, of course, it kind of brings visibility to the company and to ourselves as professionals, but there isn't really a direct economic value to the podcast. So we want to be as efficient as possible with our time investing on the podcast. Like we might be easily be spending an entire week if we really want to be fancy and try to do all sorts of interesting things. But that wouldn't be, I guess, economically feasible because we need to spend our time working with customers so we can get paid, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the combination of these two things, try to experiment and being efficient and actually constraints in the amount of time we can spend on this, lead us to be very, very efficient. There are things that we would like to do better. For instance, we don't do a lot of captioning and making sure that the captions are right. We don't do a lot of, advertisement in advance. Like next week, we're going to be talking about this. So make sure you stay on it. We end up actually improvising a little bit every week because we don't have a lot of time to pre-plan everything in advance. So there are things we wish we could do better. Maybe eventually we'll find a way to still be efficient while making the whole production quality even better.
Absolutely. It's a learning process. And even with this podcast, like I was doing captions and transcription with this Descript and putting it all there. But it took me a lot of time to, kind of like organize the text and like correct some mistakes. I'm like, I was like, with myself, like I was like, wait a second, why am I doing this? It's a podcast. It's supposed to be a natural conversation. It's not like a scripted. Yeah. So I came with it with the aspect of YouTube. So I'm very familiar with YouTube scripting, and I tried to apply that to the podcast and then realized, wait a second, I'm just overcomplicating things and start to kind of make it simpler and streamlined. So it's always a learning process, and I can totally understand that. Luciano, I want to move on talking about the psychological part of creating content, which is a big deal for all of us, because after all, we're not machines, we're not a script, we're not a code, we're human beings, right? So sometimes you wake up with a lot of energy, sometimes you don't. And sometimes you have bad days, sometimes you have good days. But when it comes to creating content, we need a lot of energy, especially the creative process. You need like this constant flow of ideas, the positive energy should be there. What are the things that you do to keep yourself in this high performance mode? And how do you stay there? Is there something that you do outside of work, outside of your, let's say, daily routine, maybe meditation, maybe gym, maybe some things you do in the morning that keeps you really in that zone of creativity?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I don't know if I have like a clear answer, but I can try to talk about a few ideas that come into my mind. One thing that I do, and I don't do it deliberately, I think I just like to do it, is to follow different people that are creative in different industries, like not necessarily in the range of like coding, programming, software engineering, but a lot actually more outside. Like I really like a lot to follow people on Instagram that are illustrators, and they show all their creative process and all their illustrations. And actually end up following a lot of people with very different styles, just because I'm curious to see like how those kind of people can use their own creativity to produce things like out of the blue. And yeah, I'm always amazed to see all these things. And the same for musicians. Like I end up listening a lot of very different music styles, mostly every day while I'm working. I almost all the time, if I'm not in a call, listening to music. And I also follow one category that I really love is game makers, like video game makers, because I think that's a unique combination of storytelling, music, coding, graphics. There are a lot of them that, for instance, do live streams on Twitch, and they show their entire creative process. And I'm always amazing of the amount of skills that these people have in totally different areas, and they can combine all the skills together to produce a video game. So I think by just following all this...
Yeah, I have to ask, are you a gamer yourself?
And I wouldn't consider myself an hardcore gamer. I do try to play game every once in a while, I find it refreshing and just to disconnect a little bit and just play a game. But I wouldn't be an hardcore gamer as I used to be, maybe when I was in my, 16s to 18 years old. I was playing a lot more hours every day at that time.
Yeah. It's funny, like for me, so I'm a tech guy. I have a tech channel, and I'm also a PC gamer, and I found an excuse to play games, which is basically, so I have Xbox controllers right here for
Nice.
PC, but I found an excuse, which is make a new channel for gaming to kind of like kill two birds with one stone. Like if I'm gonna game, I'm gonna stream at the same time. It's just like a hobby channel, and it's been really working well for me because I know the feeling of like, how can you discipline yourself in terms of like, don't play too much game and you forget about the business content creation. But at the same time, I feel that, like you said, following gamers or even playing a game can open the creative aspects of your brain that maybe not gonna be explored with different things, right? Like different disciplines. And I feel like gaming, especially for creators, can be a great way to be more creative and come up with new ideas. And especially for me, it's helped a lot to kind of like have a balance between not gaming too much and at the same time using that energy to create content.
Absolutely. And I think especially if you follow that indie gaming world, there are people with so many amazing ideas, and they can really give you so many different inputs that then maybe even unconsciously you're going to end up using in your own creative work. So I definitely agree with that point where gaming may be a little bit of fun and getting relaxed, but at the same time, you can get a lot of inputs, even unconsciously, that then you can reuse in your own day-to-day content creation activities.
And by the way, it's also a great way to improve your response time in general.
Oh, yeah. Depending what kind of games you're playing. Yes.
Awesome. Luciano, I want to move on talking about your mentor or your biggest mentor in life. So this question is basically about what kind of book, person, or anything in life that you consider as a mentor, and it had a big influence and impact on your life. It could be a dead person, a live person, could be a book, ancient, modern, anything in life that you consider a mentor.
Yeah, this one is kind of a hard question to try to reply to for me, because I think in tech, you are exposed to so many people and so many different content creators because it's such a wide topic and things are changing every day that it's really hard to find that one person that has taught you the most. I think
or maybe in your career as well, like as a software developer, do you look up to guys like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, I don't know, any other coders, people like that really inspire you for your career, but also can inspire you in life in general, right?
Yeah, I think there might be a few big famous players, but I think that every one of them comes with their own flaws that most of the time people pretend they don't see the flaws. So I don't want to say against Steve Jobs or Bill Gates because they've been inspirational for many people and definitely very important in the technology world. But also they had many flaws and people don't talk too much about those, which I wish they did a little bit more. So maybe I want to give a shout out to people that have been working more directly and they've been helping me a lot. For instance, I want to give a shout out to Mario Casciaro, who is the co-author of the book I mentioned before. And he actually wrote the first edition of the book alone and then involved me from the second edition. So it gave me an amazing opportunity to learn more and develop my career and become a book author while standing on the shoulders of giants, because I didn't have to do everything from scratch. I was basically working with him, learning from him, and working on a book that already had a very solid ground. So definitely want to give him a shout out as somebody that has been inspirational for me and also helped me a lot to develop my career. Then there are other two content creators, I'm going to say, that I like to follow every once in a while. And they are very good. They are not necessarily in the technology space, but I think they're influencing a lot my way of seeing content creation. One is Ali Abdal, who has a very famous YouTube channel.
I love Ali Abdal. Awesome.
And he talks about so many different things, but the part that I like the most from his YouTube videos is when he talks about his content management workflow. Like, for instance, how he uses Notion and Room Research and all these kind of tools. But also you can see, if you have been following him for a while, you can see that when he was a solo creator, he had a very specific workflow. And now that he has a team behind him creating content every day, he actually did recently a few videos showing how all that original process evolved to support multiple people in the process. So it's really interesting to just see how people come up with always new ideas, organize them, and then from the idea to actually have something production ready that they can share with people. And another group is this group of people called Ship 30 for 30. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Not really.
It's a group of, I think that their background is being copywriters. So they are a lot more focused on the writing side of creating content. And they have this podcast. They have this program, which is basically you challenge yourself to create 30 Twitter threads in a month, so one every day. And then basically you should be learning and be getting a lot more confident. But I haven't tried that one. The reason why I'm following them is because they generally post videos on YouTube, which are like conversations with other professionals, where they try to describe like all the tools that they use. And the one that I love the most is where they present this AAA for A's framework, which is like a framework that you can use to generate new content ideas. So it's like, if you don't know, you want to talk about something, but you don't really know how to structure it and how many different things you can do around that topic, you can literally apply this framework. And I actually tried it myself, and you can come up with like hundreds of articles, ideas, or video ideas. So it's extremely interesting to see.
Can you talk us about, walk us through like this, let's say Quattro or 4A's strategy.
4A's,
what is it about?
Yeah, it's basically, it kind of helps you to understand if you have an idea. I don't know, for instance, I want to talk about Markdown, right? Because we mentioned Markdown today. It kind of pushes to think how many different types of article can come out from this one idea. And it kind of pushes you to think more about what is the final thing you want to give to people, and to be more specialized and maybe produce a bunch of different specialized content rather than one big generic piece of content. For instance, you can come up with an article that says using Markdown for podcast creation, or even for, even more specific to that, you can say podcast creation in the financial space. Right? So it kind of try to push you to think, okay, who is your audience? What kind of content are you doing? Is this an inspirational content? Is a content based on, presenting statistics? Like, you can create a content, why more and more people are using Markdown today? Or, it can be like a content where you want to highlight your own personal challenge and how that challenge made you better. For instance, how I learned to drop Microsoft Word and move to Markdown.
Or so the famous one on YouTube, how Markdown changed my life.
Something like that. So it kind of makes you think about all the different common ways of structuring content, and it forces you to think, how can I apply these different strategies and these different types of audiences to my specific idea? And then you literally come up with a tree of, from one root idea, you can kind of derive so many different types of content. And of course, you don't have to work on all of them. At that point, you can decide, okay, I want to cover this topic extensively, so I'm going to create, a list of posts that I'm going to start writing over time. Or maybe you just say, no, I want to focus on this particular one because I think it's the best angle for my idea, and don't cover all the other ones.
Yeah, you can
So
start
this,
to filter after some time, right?
exactly, yeah.
Do you know what the A's stand for? That's my
Oh,
question.
I actually had it somewhere. Now I don't remember.
It's okay, no worries. So yeah, like this strategy, I think will really help a lot of people creating content, especially when it comes to not having the clear ideas about what topics to talk about and how can how can you like diversify your type of content. Luciano, I wanna ask you now about the wild side of the internet, or what I would like to call the dark side of the internet. Have you
Yes.
ever had any experience with negative comments, negative feedback, maybe even toxic or trolling people? And how did you deal with that? Because for me, this is a big question for creators, because I know personally people who, let's say, had a big following or big business creating content, but they literally gave up on it because of this. So it's a big deal when it comes to online content. And I want to talk to you about it in terms of how did you deal with it if that was the case.
Yeah, sure. So I have to say, first of all, that in the tech industry, we're probably a little bit lucky
Yeah,
because,
I always say that we're so
yeah,
privileged and lucky. Like it's
yeah,
a very very different story with other niche content.
yeah. I think in tech, most people recognize that you are kind of in this journey where there is a lot to learn and nobody is really proficient in anything. Like everyone is still learning. So I think you don't get as many haters or trollers or whatever we want to call them that are going to just say, oh, you're not good enough to do this. So in that sense, I think it's a better environment to be in for content creator. But of course, you still end up having a lot of negative feedback, and sometimes it's
Especially the
not.
fanboys.
Yeah.
Like I had the
Eh,
experience with the Apple products. Like I start to kind of like just talk about some aspects of the MacBook, for example, when the M1 came, that this is something that you should be aware of, like the Bluetooth had issues and stuff. And I remember getting those kind of like comments that it felt so negative at the time, because that was the first time I kind of got those kind of comments. But then when I talked to other creators, they were like laughing at me, like, that's not negative. That's cute, compared to what they get in their like niche, which is like vlogging or lifestyle. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, it still happens that, as you said, that you get negative comments. I think my personal way of trying to deal with that is, first of all, try to recognize if there is any value in that negative comment. Like sometimes people will be just trolling for the sake of it, and doesn't really matter what you do or say. They will be trying to find something else negative to say. At that point, I think the only thing you can do is just try to ignore these particular people. But some other time people will tell you something like, I don't know, you are suggesting to do this particular thing with, I don't know, some particular example, maybe in software engineering, like to do this thing, do it this way. I had an instance a few months ago where somebody was saying me, this is actually a terrible idea, full stop. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And it turned out that I was actually suggesting something that wasn't that good as I thought, because there might have been some particular implications in terms of security, in terms of code quality, that if you were following my original advice, very easily you might have ended up in a bad path from kind of a software engineering perspective. So I actually ended up taking that feedback. Like eventually I was pushing this person to give me like more insights, like what am I missing? Tell me more. I'm really interested. Like I was trying to take a positive angle on that feedback. And actually this person was at that point very open and useful, and they gave me a lot of background. And then I ended up creating a new piece of content out of that saying, by the way, I recommended this. It turned out I was wrong, and these are the reason why. And thanks to all the people that contributed to kind of this piece of content, telling me why it was a bad idea and what I should have suggested instead. So I think that was an extremely useful learning opportunity for me. But just because I wasn't really afraid about the negative feedback, I actually embraced that negative feedback, trying to figure out, okay, is there something that I can learn from this experience? And
Like
it
don't
turned out
take it
people
personally, right?
exactly, yeah.
I literally had the same experience with the MacBook thing. Like I kind of engaged because I always try to stay positive no matter what kind of comment I get. Like try to be professional about it. And I remember asking that guy who was kind of like criticizing my video, like what did I really say that bother you. And he was like, exactly what happened to you. He was giving me some details that I did not know. And I had to make an updated video because Apple actually fixed that with a software update. But I did not really follow that. And he was really giving me those insights. And it turned out to be like a good conversation afterwards. So I can totally relate to that. So awesome.
And I think it's also good for a content creator to show that, I mean, we are not perfect. We don't know it all, and we will do mistakes. As long as we are open to accept our mistakes and make sure we redact them and we publish new updated content, I think that's just human nature. And I hope that people on the other side appreciate being very human and trying new things, failing, and then getting better and trying again.
Yeah, and then you end up, you end up, showing your genuine side, right? And that's what really attract let's say, the good audience, or the audience that you really want, the people that respect you for who you are. And we're all kind of learning in this journey, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially in tech where things move so fast that you'll always be learning. Even in 30 years, you're not going to be like an absolute expert because there will be so many new things and you are still trying to catch up with the previous one.
Absolutely. That's always going to be in tech, but also in other fields like crypto or whatever. Luciano, I want to talk to you about the book. So for me, making a book or writing a book is the ultimate kind of level of creating content. Can you tell us a bit about what was that for you in terms of the challenge, and what did you learn from that process?
Yeah, so there is actually a very long story behind the book, but I'm going to try to summarize what I think is important for your question. So as I said, this book is not something that I wrote myself from scratch. So it was an existing book written by Mario Casciaro. So he did all the work around publishing the first edition. And actually, the interesting part of the story is that I wanted to learn this particular technology, Node.js at the time, and I ended up reading this book even before knowing Mario and meeting him in person. So at some point, life gave me this gift that I was able to meet Mario and talk with him. And we became friends because we ended up living in the same city, Dublin, Ireland. And at some point, after like a few months that we knew each other and we were just going out for beers and chatting, he told me, I want to work on a second edition because I think now there is a lot of innovation on this topic and it's due for a second edition, but I don't have the time to do it myself. I've seen your blog. You write a lot of interesting articles. Do you want to join me and we can do the second edition together? So that was kind of a scary but exciting moment in my career, because at that time I was still feeling I am learning this stuff. Like I'm definitely not an expert. I'm not going to have the experience to write a book on this topic while I'm still learning it. But at the same time, I thought this is kind of a unique opportunity because I'm not going to be doing that alone, but I'm going to be working with one of the most recognized professionals in this particular topic, in this particular subject. So I kind of embraced that opportunity and said, okay, even if I'm afraid now, let's try it and let's see how it goes. And actually I found myself learning a lot more than I thought, because even the things that I thought I knew very well, then when you try to put them on paper and explain this concept, you start to ask yourself so many questions and you realize, actually, I didn't really know how this thing worked. I needed to go and try more things and study a bunch of different things, read the documentation, read the code base, to really be able to explain to somebody else what's going on. So you end up, at least for me, this was the process, I ended up questioning more and more my knowledge to be able to explain it to somebody else. And then I think at the end, I came out with a much deeper understanding of all the different subjects. And of course, with a book, you have a bunch of editors. In this case, I had another author that gives you reviews and gives you ideas. So that's also part of the process where you get so many different inputs and you realize, okay, this thing could be done better, or actually this thing was even wrong. Let me fix it and let me correct it. But you are also fixing your own kind of perception of the topics and your own understanding of certain specific topics. So I think it was an amazing experience personally, an amazing growth experience as a professional. But at the same time, once you have a book out, and in this case, I think we have been very lucky that the book has been recognized very well by the community. That also becomes kind of something that you are recognized for in the community and opens so many doors for, I don't know, public speaking, working in different companies, meeting other professionals and having interesting chats. So definitely an experience that enriched me in many ways.
I'm sure of it. It's going to be awesome for your career. Is there something that you learned from this process of getting involved in creating a book or being an author that helped you afterwards with your content creation and other subjects that you kind of talk about?
I guess there are two aspects of this question. One is like before the book and after.
Yep.
I think that before the book, I think it's important to recognize that I probably got there because I was already creating content. For instance, Mario saw my blog, saw my articles, and he decided, okay, you are doing stuff that is probably good enough for you to be somebody I could trust to help me with the book.
And,
So
and
this is
just to say something for people listening or watching this, I guess, and you can correct me, you did not put that in your head that somebody will read my blog and then will get me involved in their book, right? It was just like creating content, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. But also, it's even more interesting than that, because the reason why I met Mario was because after I read his book, I basically went off and started to build a bunch of side projects just to exercise myself with the new knowledge. And then I published one of these projects in an online community saying, this is my first project with this technology. I'm sure I'm getting many things wrong. What do you think? Just give me feedback. What can I do better? And I got so many feedback by so many different people, including Mario, who was one of them. And I was like, oh, it's so amazing to meet you, because I was actually reading your book, and that's how we started to getting to know each other. So I think the learning there is like, don't be afraid of trying different things and sharing them, even when you are sure you are doing a lot of things wrong. Because if you find the right community that supports you and gives you feedback, you have an opportunity to learn from your mistakes and get better, and then meet people that you can keep interacting with during your career. So that was definitely a big...
Yeah. Don't overthink about creating content. Like you never know who's going to read it or what's going to happen. And sometimes I feel like creators have this struggle of like, I'm creating content, but I'm not getting any feedback, or the world is not opening its big doors for me. And I feel that if people can just stick to, improving the process, creating more content and becoming a better creator, like you never know what's going to happen. And your story now is a big eye opener for a lot of people, I guess.
Yeah, I think what's important there to realize is that you only need to be very clear and open about where you're starting from. Like I wasn't trying to sell myself. I am the expert of Node.js.
Yep.
Check out this project. I think that would have led me to a totally different path if I was doing that. I probably would have needed a lot more confidence than I have to do that. But at the same time, like, why should you lie about your starting point? I think you can still be valuable to people, even by just saying, this is my first project and this is how I did it. What do you think? I think there will be many people that are on the same level as you, where they can see, oh, okay, let's see how somebody else is doing their first project with this technology. But also people that are a lot more experienced than you, they might be curious to see, okay, let's see this programming language from the perspective of somebody that is just starting. What kind of things are they doing well? What kind of things are they doing wrong? How can I help them to get better? So I think as long as you make very clear what's your starting point and where you're coming from, you are still providing a valuable perspective, and people can relate in different way to that perspective. But if you just try to oversell yourself, probably you're not setting yourself up for success. So I guess the bottom line is just be very honest with your starting point, make it very clear at the beginning, and then you're still probably going to have something valuable for other people.
Yeah, here's the funny thing, and I think you will agree with this. With the internet now and so much content that's out there, I think being genuine, like truly genuine, is one of like the most kind of like valued things that you could have online. Because now there are a lot of like fake gurus, fake experts, a lot of content, and a lot of creators, they feel kind of overwhelmed with this, and they say, oh, I cannot compete with that. And I feel personally, what I tell them, or what I feel is that just stay genuine to yourself, and that will open the door for you, because it's crowded with all the crap and all this kind of like fake stuff. So if you stay genuine, you actually are, holding to the gold of the online content that we have now, which is basically... we have so much, fake stuff out there that if you stay true to yourself, that will open the door to you in many different ways.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, the other side of this is that people think that it's all or nothing. Like either you are the guru or or you are nodding. And I don't think that's true. I think there are so many shades where you can be positioning yourself and still get a lot of value. Like even if you are in a small community where people are talking to you every day, yeah, maybe you don't see yourself as the guru or the main person of reference in that particular field, but you are still getting a lot of useful knowledge, interaction with people, growing your career or your knowledge, whatever that is. So again, don't think that it's an all or nothing kind of thing, but there is always like a journey where you start from zero and then you keep moving to the top if you want to, but you don't necessarily have to become the guru to become, I don't know, a serious professional or to just have fun or to just keep growing in an area that interests you.
And a lot of creators, when they begin their journey, they usually are attracted to these kind of vanity metrics or big names that, oh, I want to be that guy. I want to be the best in this. You can get there, but you have to go through the natural process. And that takes a lot of like humility, being genuine and just learning. Like you're not trying to fake it till you make it, which is something that I don't really like this idea of fake it till you make it because
I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't really work in terms of long-term branding. Luciano, we were almost done with the podcast, so I have the last question for you. Can you tell us about your next big projects and where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I feel like I have already way too many projects. So probably my next step will be to try to drop some of them rather than starting new ones.
Okay.
But at the same time, I mean, I'm always very active chatting with people and looking for new ideas. And sometimes I'm not going to start a project myself, but I'd be more than happy to, I don't know, suggest, exchange ideas for other people that are maybe thinking, okay, should I start this project or not? So if you want to chat with me in that sense, you can probably, the best place where you can probably find me is on Twitter. My nickname is Loige, which you will spell it as Loige. Very weird nickname, but that's it. And so feel free to follow me there and just send me a DM. I'm actually chatting with so many people on Twitter, and I'd be happy to keep chatting with new people. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So if you prefer LinkedIn because you feel it's more of a professional space, that's a channel that works for me too. And you can easily find me there as well.
That's awesome. And we're going to keep all the details in the show note. So with that said, Luciano, thank you so much for being on the show. This was really so valuable. And I think a lot of people will find some inspiration. And at least we can get like few people starting their journey from your story. So thank you so much for being here.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. Bye.
Absolutely. So thank you guys and see you in the next one. Bye.